During a domestic fiscal emergency, sticking rigidly to spending 0.7% of our national income on overseas aid is difficult to justify to the British people.
The Conservative government had one big political priority this week: to avoid defeat on the thorny issue of cuts to the international development budget. That cut from 0.7% of GDP to 0.5%. Now that's just one of the quite painful cuts that Rishi Sunak announced in his budget earlier this year. But it's particularly difficult in this building over here because there's a large number of Conservative MPs who really support the foreign aid budget, really hate the idea of cuts to it. They see it as partly a moral responsibility, partly an anchor of our foreign policy, and for some of them, they just don't like that it was a manifesto promise and therefore they think that it should be kept.
It will have an enormous impact on our role in the world and above all on the huge number of people who will be very severely damaged, maimed, often blinded and indeed die as a result of these cuts.
Their most effective ringleader is Andrew Mitchell, not only a former International Development Secretary but a former Chief Whip, so someone who knows how to organise and knows how to defeat the government. So in order to avoid defeat, they've gone for a very, very old parliamentary trick, which is what you do is you get your U-turn and you present it so late in the day that your opponents hopefully don't have time to notice that what you're promising isn't a U-turn at all.
The reduction in the aid budget is temporary. It defines a reasonable set of tests for when we will return to 0.7, and it makes those tests objective and verifiable.
So what Rishi Sunak has very cleverly done is he said, look, this cut is temporary until the following two things happen. One, we are no longer borrowing to fund day-to-day spending, and two, debt is falling as a proportion of GDP.
It is a fiscal trap for the unwary. It is indisputably the case that there have only been one occasion in the last 2 decades, in 2001, when these conditions would have been met.
The problem is, if you know anything about the economic history of the United Kingdom, those two things are both so rare, and it's a bit like me saying, I'll give every NS reader a free Solero the second that the dragon that lives in the moon comes out of its moon egg and eats the sun. All right? Sounds generous, but I'm probably pretty confident that the moon dragon ain't eating the sun and I don't have to give you a Solero as a result. The reason to think that they could get home is that there are Tory MPs who want an excuse to be loyal. They want to be able to say to constituents who are opposed to this cut, well look, here's the guarantee I got, here's the thing I've got. They want to come home and be constructive members of the Tory family.
I'm sure we're going to get the deficit down.
But my right honourable friend is looking in the crystal ball. I've read in the book, in the last 20 years there would have been just one occasion. So a vote for the government tonight is a vote to end, in my submission, our 0.7 commitment.
Now the problem for Boris Johnson is what this vote has revealed is that while there are lots of MPs who want to come home, want to find any excuse, no matter how thin, to vote for him, there's still a large group of people who don't want to come home, who do want to defeat him on a variety of issues. And regardless of the outcome of votes like this in weeks like this, the existence of that second group is a big headache for him and a big difficulty for this government as it seeks to pass controversial bills and measures in the future.